Welcome to Season 2 of Vision 2222, the podcast where we get into conversations with interesting people who have valuable insights and ask them to go out on a limb and imagine what the world will be like in the future. We talk with leaders from industry, science, engineering, and the humanities, not only about what's happening around us today, but also what we might see if we jumped ahead in time, 20, 50, 100, or 200 years. In the season's finale, we will combine all the learnings and discoveries into a vivid painting of the world circa 2222. Vision 2222 is the brainchild of co-hosts Mikhail Gladkik, Amanda Chady, and John Marsh.
Hi, I am Mikhail. I'm a technologist and a science fiction author. My professional career provides me with a unique perspective on the technologies of the future. I'm working at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution, advancing 3D printing, artificial intelligence, digital supply chain, and energy transition.
And I'm Amanda Chady, an entrepreneurial scientist mentoring startups in healthcare innovation and life sciences. And I advocate for ventures that are making positive changes towards a better future.
And I'm John Marsh. I've been working since 2008 as an administrator at a major research university in Houston, Texas, where I get a ringside seat to watch and support an amazing world of scientific and engineering innovation. Today, we have guests Katelyn Lennon and Adam Penna, and we're really happy to have them. Katelyn is with Wurth Additive Group. She is a master marketer, having come from the world of finance, marketing intangibles straight into tangibles, very tangibles, as marketing manager for Wurth Additive. Adam Penna is a veteran of additive manufacturing, and I noticed in the people who he knows, many people I've overlapped with as well, and it's really awesome, including Slade Gardner, who is so hard to get a hold of. Adam, do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Good guy though. Good.
Oh yes.
Yeah, great.
So
great
Adam,
to talk to him.
Yeah, Adam is CEO and founder of his own company, All Digital Additive Manufacturing, which conveniently spells Adam, and he's been with multiple companies that do a lot of leading edge, bleeding edge additive manufacturing for many years. I will now turn this over. Actually, Katelyn, if you wouldn't mind saying a few words about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today. As you said, my name is Katelyn Lennon. Currently, I'm the head of marketing at Wurth Additive Group, which is part of the larger global organization of the Wurth Group. I've been in marketing, business development, strategic partnerships, community engagement for over a decade, primarily coming from the world of finance. I am born and raised in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Kalamazoo.
Kalamazoo. So you've heard of it. Yes. So that's we'll talk about that at length too, of the campaign. I have to continue on with that. So, but I attended Michigan State University. I ran track there for a bit, as well as went to the James Madison Honors College, studied social relations and policy and psychology, did a significant amount of undergrad quantitative psychology research that focused on behavior genetics. And then really at a later part of my undergrad, I hit the ground running when I started going into marketing research, qualitative research, social research, and we'll probably dive back into my master's there at one point. I'm married with 3 amazing stepkids and our crazy dog, Miller, who you will probably hear at one point in the podcast. So.
Great to have you here, Katelyn. And I noticed that track on I noticed that you had run track somewhere on LinkedIn, I believe. And just the fact of being a student athlete and still making things work well is an achievement all by itself. And obviously it gave you the ability to do a lot at one time.
Well, and I was very honored to run there. And I mean, I wasn't able to run the whole time throughout my undergrad because at one point, I just really commend student athletes because they really start a career in college. It's very impressive.
Adam, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Sure, John. Thank you. No, I was actually loving everything Katelyn said. I really could identify with the way the communications has grown and getting into it over the years. I actually started out. I've had my whole career in manufacturing. On the inside, on the design side for mechanical engineering, is where I started out doing mostly CATIA. That was really what got me onto the big side of all the automotive assemblies and aerospace assemblies out there that were really interesting. And next thing I know, I started to see a lot of 3D printing out there and got into the metrology side of things. So that's measurement, inspection, reverse engineering. You get into scanner surface scanning where you collect the data of things. And that's a lot of the surfaces that are turned into 3D printing files that you could actually print out and see for yourself. And I started to see that in my life. And then it kind of turned into looking into the additive manufacturing, digital manufacturing side of things, and got involved to fast forward. I mean, I spent a lot of time in metrology, but also moved over to the additive side, spent even 5 years at EOS, which is one of the premier metal and polymer additive manufacturing companies out there. So a lot of that's actually where I met Mikkel. So I got the invite to be on the show. So no, it's been a wild road. There's a lot of great things that happen in manufacturing. I guess my just my passion and my experience led me into the media side of things and dealing with communications, and had the privilege recently of working with the ASME, the American Society for Mechanical Engineers, to build their additivemanufacturing.com, the industry's platform that was just recently sold. So back to supporting the industry again and doing it with all digital additive manufacturing. So great to be here. A lot of great things going on as far as communication goes, and I'm really thinking about the 2022 that you proposed as what 200 years might look from now, because wow, those 100-year changes are hard to predict, that's for sure. And 200 years from now, who knows? But we'll be digging in, so looking forward to it.
Exactly. We want people to really stretch, and you're right. Even 100, even 50 years is hard, especially as fast as things change. But we really want people to break open their minds and provide insights that are almost unfettered.
Yeah.
Amanda.
Yes. So Katelyn and Adam, welcome to the Vision 2222 podcast. We're so excited to have you both on here. And I will just jump right in with Katelyn. I'll get started. So Katelyn, so you've spent 7 years as a TV broadcaster for all race day coverage of the Kalamazoo Marathon and the Borges run of the health of it, helping to tell the story of the #1 road race in Michigan. So I looked at this race, it has quite a history, and I saw that the mission is to promote health and to prevent illness through exercise and rehabilitation. It has a very strong legacy, and it continues to grow. I read that since, after COVID, the total participants in the marathon and the half marathon and other walks and runs increased 61% from 2022. So it seems that it's really growing. So I'm really interested to hear or to tell us more about your experiences you had with this community event. What did being a TV broadcaster teach you about communicating with a wider audience? And if you have any funny stories to tell us, please, just share it all. We would, love to laugh a little bit.
That sounds great. Thanks, Amanda. Well, there's lots of stories being a voluntary broadcaster, but coming from Kalamazoo, being a longtime runner and being a part of this community, it's been very interesting in the ways that we have, because we're a smaller town known for a couple of different things, whether it's the Kalamazoo Promise or Bell's Brewery or Stryker, and most recently the Pfizer vaccine development, that people are very passionate when they come from Kalamazoo and to get engaged in the community. Particularly with Blaine Lamb, he really, not only with the Kalamazoo Marathon, he developed the #1 actually race training group that studied with all sorts of health policies across the nation, because it's the largest across America. And so I think really when Blaine and I met, as I started volunteering and I started talking with people about it, as it's amazing not only for the size of this town to have a marathon, let alone have this type of engagement and have the type of running talent that comes to it. So when they wanted to do, a startup broadcast for it, it hadn't been done before. You normally would see the professionals, if they do cover running, because it's a long period of time, several hours, there's people are running, there's not a lot of action as like what you would see notoriously like with a game or something along those lines. So I was very intrigued of what they wanted to communicate, what did they want the story to tell, and just knowing so much about it already, I think just started the conversation. I think what we really kind of taken away, I mean, it started with probably, after all of this preparing, and I mean, it took months and months to prepare and they're constantly preparing for the race. But when my co-broadcaster and I, Tim Went, who was, he was a CPA at Planet Moran, and he was actually doing this on his side time as well. In planning for this, we know the runners, we know the times, we're both marathon runners, we know how that feeling might be. And it was really interesting to kind of convey that, where, my facial expressions, my overword use of the word absolutely every 2 seconds, I felt like was so uncomfortable for that first minute. I actually introduced my first broadcast with the wrong year, if you can imagine that, because I was so nervous, which really kind of lightened the mood at this point. But each year and each time, I think what we really continue to bring it back to is that knowing those racers, knowing the times, and being able to work with our broadcast crew, and even, explaining to them, like, this person is running 7-minute miles. They're hitting this point of the race. They're going to be starting to lose, trend. Now they're going downhill, and really explaining that story of not only a race perspective, but how our community is involved with it was, I think, the passion that I already had for our involvement and our town's involvement in the race just started to become much easier to explain, more authentic. And I think when people were able to see that and hear that, I'm passionate about the topic, as well as I feel like with anything you do, including your the podcast that you have here, as for talking about the future, I think people want to hear your level of enthusiasm and story. And I think that type of individual perspective and seeing it as a whole is so much more relatable than maybe a professional coming in and then learning about the story. It's a completely different perspective, but it has changed a lot over the time. And even now, another community leader, the Ziegler Automotive Group, they took it over from Ascension Hospital. And it continues to get bigger every year, where I'm really excited to see the direction that they will take it, especially their CEO is really a visionary for podcasting and community involvement, and it'll be exciting to see.
Great. And, I want to take away a few keywords that you mentioned in your story and follow up a little bit, because you mentioned a lot about, your journey and your ability to have or improve on your storytelling, as well as, a sense of community that was created. And I want to just, try to understand your views on where you think TV broadcasting will go. So most people know that, we use TVs, their shows, it's a main source of entertainment. It is all about storytelling. And if you noticed, in the last 10 to 15 years, there have been, streaming services like Netflix, Disney, Hulu Plus. We have smart TVs. So given the rapid pace of, these technological changes in TV, I think that the landscape will continue to evolve and to look completely different in like a decade from now. So, it can be with broadcasting as you've done. I just want to see, what is your views, or how do you think TV or broadcasting will evolve in the future? And I'll make it easy. I'll just say, what do you think, like 10 years from now or 20 years from now? Any changes that you predict in broadcasting or just TV in general?
Ooh, even just 5 years from now, I feel like it's going to dramatically change. I thought was really interesting when I asked the question about getting involved with this broadcast. Mm-hmm. I asked why, wouldn't we want people there? Or why wouldn't we just want to invest in more PR ahead of the race? Like, why would we why would we do a TV broadcast? Because that essentially means that people aren't there at the race. And I think that was what was really interesting. It was the genius behind it of, we want the people that are maybe on their couch, maybe sitting and watching TV, or
Right.
I never thought of that concept. So I think really the way that people think about broadcasting and communicating, it's now, I think they're looking at how their demographic and how that generation regularly absorbs media, and how they can do it in a very easy way at this point. I mean, I can tell you, all of my kids, I don't think they would ever turn on the news on the TV. They would turn on their phone. If I'm trying to get a hold of them, it's through a text message, or it's through messaging them on Instagram. It's so
Right.
I think when you think about broadcast, of how they would absorb the news. When you think about absorbing the news and broadcasting, I think it'll be more from a content creation perspective, where it becomes more news media will reach out to podcasters, experts in the field, just like yourself, just like Adam, and really take advantage of their expertise, and
Right.
then reuse and resource that media. So I even wonder if broadcasting at one point, it won't be a job that, you train for in journalism anymore. It'll be something completely
Right.
different.
Yeah, maybe they won't have it as a college degree anymore. You never know, right?
You never
It's
know.
still in it. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
So, Amanda,
you.
I'd like to expand on
Yeah.
that question a little bit.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the future of communication, broadcasting, and podcasting, and what shape or form it takes. My take on it is, I still think we're pretty limited to basically using two of our senses, the vision and the hearing, in the broadcasting, whatever methods we use. I'd like to see, hear, feel, smell, touch, so have the fully immersive experience. Do you think, Katelyn and Adam, I'd like to hear your opinion as well. Is this possible? Is this potentially where we could be going with broadcasting, or not? Or are there any specific hurdles, limitations that we're not going to be able to breach?
I think you draw a great question when you're talking about absorbing the information. And I think about broadcasting and trying to communicate a message or information, I think there's kind of two areas of thought of, for example, so if I'm trying to efficiently absorb information or learn about something quickly, most of the time I'm multitasking I'm cleaning the kitchen and also listening to a podcast of the Cool Parts show on AM Media. And then I'm listening to that so I can do something else, and kind of that habit stacking of what you can do, so that when when you work, you're fully immersed in that. But if I was going to deep dive and wanted to absorb and truly, feel the messaging and the story, I'd want to visually see it. So I think it's one of those where, what does our comprehension level look like, and maybe what that's going to turn into. And I think that really depends, again, on the demographic. Is it, experts in the field? Is it people working day to day? Is it a general public? And I think also looking at, our generations of how flexible and willing to adapt to new technology and podcasts and something away from visual. I think that so I answered your question with a couple more questions, but it's an interesting thought, though.
No, thank you, Katelyn. Adam, you have any thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, tons of thoughts. There's so many bespoke ways to go about thinking about this. And you mentioned a few of them. I like how, Mikhail, you were making me think about not only, seeing and feeling things and where that can go, and experiencing things, with augmented reality and all these other things that are coming into play now. It's happening very rapidly. There's been a shift, obviously, that we've seen. Katelyn, you were talking about some great things with the passion. It's always the same, even though things are changing. Storytellers have been along, forever, and, there's a way that kind of progresses. We've seen it with the printed press, and now getting into things like, chat GPT, and now I've even looking at open GPT and all these things that actually grab, different AI and you could build off of it and go into so many different directions. However, it's the passion about the topic, like Katelyn was talking about, and being able to draw from your own experience to kind of shape what's happening there. And that's what made her, her sound like what you're saying, Katelyn, of being so well to cover the story. You understand the experience, right? And then so I really never even felt or understood that inside of media, being more on the technical side and the engineering and the sales side, and then working with marketing over the years and getting into all different sides of the business development. In 2020, we all had that shift, right? We all, that's kind of where things led into even me podcasting, which was something that wasn't even on my radar. As far I was listening to podcasts, but doing it myself wasn't something I was thinking of doing, let alone being part of my career. I was working in sales and marketing at the time, business development for EOS, and then all of a sudden everything happened with the shift, and a lot of people were in the position of trying to figure out new things and new directions. And I reinvented myself by accident. It was someone in one of the technologies out there, one of the apps called Clubhouse at the time. It got popular with audio, and so somebody invited me to it. Next thing I know, there was a woman I hadn't met, a colleague in 3D printing that worked out in Australia, that wanted to set up a room to talk about news every week with me. And we did it, and it got popular. And so that was another way that we were communicating. I had my podcast that was started very organically too. Basically, I was talking about a webinar on Zoom, kind of like this, a Zoom meeting, right? With some buddies that were, staying networked, that were looking for different jobs inside of what had happened inside of 2020. And somebody took a clip of that about us talking about the webinar and sent it to the people that were putting on the webinar. And next thing you know, people thought there was a podcast, and they were calling me up to talk to me about 3D printing, additive manufacturing technology. And I had the opportunity, just kind of happened, but it was something that I recognized because of podcasting, because of communication, because of everything we're talking about with storytelling and experience, and really being into what you're doing and be able to talk about it with people. There is a big, that's part of it, I guess, the audio side of it, that people have really been getting into the long form conversations. And then we're seeing things like, the TikTok, and shorts and things like this, where they're very quick video, boom, boom, boom. So there's all these different forms of communication with technology that are emerging right as we speak right now, that really it's becoming very kind of overwhelming. It's developing by itself, even with the AI side of things. So I'm very excited about all of it at the same time, and following it. It keeps me interested, and it's going to be a wild future that we're looking at a couple of 100 years ahead of where that might take us. So I'm excited to see all the changes that are happening now, and we're going through as we're experiencing it. So anyhow, I hope I got a little bit of an explanation there, but there's a lot going on, I think, as we speak, that kind of pushes us into the future for sure.
Yeah, no, this sounds great, and I'm excited as well. And thank you for sharing that background story. We're very happy about that accident that got you into podcasting, Adam.
Yeah, that was a heck of an experience, right? Got to talk to people like you and different people around the world that weren't having the ability to tell their story at the time. And that's how All Digital AM was launched, and then I got into the content side of things, supporting people like the Society for Manufacturing Engineers under contract work, helping come back from the pandemic for Rapid and things like that. And then it was on just content, media development, things like that, and getting involved with storytelling, and it's been a pleasure because I love the manufacturing industry. I love bleeding edge technology. So being able to experience, educate, learn, and grow from it. I'm also in Austin, Texas, to really jump for a second. I didn't say that before. And I have a 14-year-old daughter, and there's a lot happening in Austin, Texas, as we know, even with 3D printing. Yet having a 14-year-old daughter, I'm involved in looking at education a lot, and what she's going through. We have a printer at home, a 3D printer, a Prusa, that we play with and do things with. But yeah, it's kind of, and I try to push her towards the media side of things, but I don't know. We'll see. She's all at her own. She's more sports minded right now, which is fine. Yeah, there's a lot of different paths you could take at different times, depending upon where you are, being up in Michigan, like you're talking about, me being here in Austin, localized things. And even going back to our 3D printing world, it's localized printing is happening out there, and I know Wurth gets into a lot of that too. and how that's affecting our supply chain, another buzzword out there. But these are things that are all communications, all stories that are being told now to make people realize how important it is for our, I guess, community, for what we're going through with supply chain and with understanding what we could do in manufacturing. So real world things that need to be communicated in different ways as we progress, as a world, so anyways, I'll stop there, but we could talk about so much bespoke from what's happening inside of communications. It's amazing.
Well, and actually you have performed your own segue for us, because what you've been talking about is largely answers the question that I was going to ask, except that I want to ask one that's totally non-serious. Do you have a nice, good-looking 3D printed apple?
I did have one on my desk a long time ago. I do not at the moment.
But your wife is not named Eve.
No,
Okay,
I haven't heard that one in a while, but no, not.
Okay.
No, I don't.
But more seriously, you've kind of answered the question about being a founder and owner of a media business. Tell me how you go out and define and engage and develop a new audience.
Ooh, yeah. Again, I think it's a lot of where you focus, right? And there's a lot of things that are basics inside of even looking at where you have to communicate or talk about things in your particular industry or focused. For me, when you're looking at I guess working inside of feedback, that's a big thing, no matter where you're at on the road, is what works and what doesn't work. As you go through things, you learn and you adjust, but it's always the feedback you're getting from working with people,
Right.
So I think if anything, the key is to engage, and then you either failure's part of it, because a lot of times things don't work.
Right.
But it's I guess that's part of that engineering process too, that I got used to, is you got to keep pushing forward and learn from those failures. So go ahead.
Well, you've driven a lot of marketing. Both you and Katelyn in your different career paths have been marketing and sales drivers. And how do you see your experience with the media business, and it's that experience, how is that different from marketing a more of a tangible product?
That's a good question. That's a really, I'm curious.
You want me to jump in, Katelyn, and answer? I mean, there's two different sides of that, right? Because marketing, and media. Marketing is more focused on the company, the product, what actually we're trying to communicate as far as where we're looking to go. But on the media side of it, what I've seen is it's more of a it's what the people want to hear a lot. That could be good and bad, right? But looking at it in the focused manufacturing sense, it's the things we've been talking about, things like building a solid supply chain in the U.S. With using advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, additive manufacturing, robotics, all part of it, and that's all happening right now, and so those hot topics are stuff that go out media wise, is where we're focusing on those bleeding edge applications out there, people who are sending rockets into space further and using less fuel and things like that because of 3D printing. There's all these applications that people are actually need to know about and need to grow from and are working that are very much the focus in the media form of the industry. Now, when you're getting into the marketing side of it, it moves and it shakes, right? You're out there, Katelyn, and you see things that work sometimes, things that don't. I could talk about events even recently. Events have their ups and downs. Sometimes you invest and the investment you're putting into maybe moving things to the event, things like that are way more than you should have put in. And you find out from different results you get on leads and things that you could measure against inside of more of the marketing sense, where you're measuring what's happening, where you're converting, hopefully, some of the leads you're getting into sales, and how you're actually attracting the right market out there. So it's marketing and media are dependent upon, where they're focused, and it's been wild on the media side, even looking at publications and content. I have huge respect for, everyone out there who is in the media and publication industry, because there is a lot going on, and there's a lot to, there's even a lot of different places where you get different information, So today, that's another hard part of it is whittling through the right information, especially in media context. But those people get called out in media too, so there's a process for all that. Anyhow, I see those as two separate that way, as more when you're marketing something, you're working towards something specific to a company or a product, and then the media side of it is more of what you're looking at from the feedback of the whole community.
Yeah, I see. In a sense, it sounds like you have a higher iteration rate with marketing media, marketing the medium or the product of the media that you're producing, because you're reaching out for feedback really fast and adjusting to that very quickly. It's harder to be that nimble with a product, although the whole point of additive manufacturing is to be nimble. I think that we have Mikhail up next. Yes.
Yeah, just building on this conversation, Katelyn, and it's a nice segue as well. Katelyn, you just joined recently Wurth Additive Group, and you're part of Additive family as well. It's a rapidly growing and highly innovative technology, and we talked about it, how it changes supply chains and materials and everything, how we build and manufacture goods. Compared with your previous expertise in other industries, do you see different challenges in the additive space and in general in this high-tech type of industry? Does it require also innovation in marketing and communication approach?
Oh, absolutely. And I've only been, that was a very nice intro, but I have really only been a part of the additive industry for 6 months, maybe. It's been very intense and exciting period, because I'm learning so much from my colleagues, such as Mikhail and, anyone on our team, because they have such an enthusiasm for it. But what's really interesting, and I found this really parallel from coming back from finance, is that with additive, I think this concept of there's so many different applications, so many different printing methods, but there's so much to be applied and discovered and talked about. And I think it's so different from what could happen in each business, comparably what works for this one or for a different industry. And hearing, and I'm never hesitant to ask questions, and I'm very lucky because our team at Wurth Additive is not annoyed at me just yet for asking too many of them. But they're always willing to answer them. There's so many different factors that go into that. And I think when you start to think about 3D printing in comparison to something like finance, with finance, what I actually saw is that it was really difficult for financial advisors, for people to make investing in the market approachable, because it is really complicated and to understand it. It's also can be very basic when it's described in the right way and it's made approachable, and it's personalized to what actually makes sense for your situation. And working on that type of benefit and explanation that actually resonates and is comparable to how an advisor works and how their business works and what they're trying to do. It's just almost like Adam was talking about. It's just a reverse engineering process of like the puzzle of, okay, well, this makes sense and this makes sense, but what are you trying to do? And of making sure that that's actually communicated, I think. And so I think with additive, the markets have been around, for forever. And so with additive, I think it's at a different point within the manufacturing industry where it's a little bit more, while it's been around for decades, it's really starting to multiply in its growth. And I see the charts of how it's going to grow, even over the next couple of years. The next 10 years is going to be instrumental to the industrial side of manufacturing. So I think that's where understanding and really diving into what the messaging needs to be and how we explain it too. I think even maybe as I just explained it right now too, we have a lot of charismatic SEs on our team, and I'll have to tell them, okay, wait, say that in English one more time, say it in English, because they're at this brilliant engineering level, and I'm trying to figure it out 3 different ways of how this could make sense to somebody else, not a part of or not as familiar within the additive industry, or maybe not understanding of how this would work. And, I'm very excited to see where things go. And we have so many different perspectives, I think, on our team, and even hearing Adam's perspective as coming from engineering and then looking at it from a different perspective of the marketing and the messaging of maybe even what we just saw at like Rapid TCT. I mean, I heard a lot of feedback from people that walked in who were, at a different stage of being familiar with additive, and they walked in and it was completely confusing when they were just wanting to start to learn about additive because there's so many different facets.
Could
so
you
I think
explain that that acronym, Rapid TCT, for the
yeah,
audience?
So actually, I might need a little help from Adam now that I think about it. Rapid TCT is one of a larger additive trade shows, as well as we have the first Formnext coming to Austin in August. So there's some, from my understanding, and AMUG, another one of there's some trade shows that I think the additive industry prioritizes in ways that that's additive exclusive and can show that technology where they're just starting to get into it, they can look around, or if they're experts, they can see what's new, what's innovative, what are people bringing. So it's a wide scope. So Rapid is one of those trade shows that are going on. But I think Adam could probably speak a little more to that.
No, you got it, Katelyn. You nailed it. I mean, it's an annual trade show and conference. You could get educated there as well as walk around and see a lot of the new equipment up close and personal, and talk with people on the floor and get to know more about the technology, and also it's a great place just to network at the same time. You don't see a lot of those same people, and you get to learn about what's happening and who's doing what. And, you could see everything you want to see in one place annually. So it's run by the Society for Manufacturing Engineers, SME, Rapid. That's an annual event. And that was the one where we saw each other last, I believe, Katelyn and
yes.
Kyle. And So it's a great show.
So,
but the other ones she mentioned are also annual shows that happen inside of additive manufacturing.
So the advantage, though, then goes to the company or the person who can explain things to the people who are technically able or interested but aren't expert in the field. But then if you're able to get them educated to the point where they're comfortable with it, then you become their first person to talk with about it. And so you have an edge on the competition for getting their business.
Great point. And a great part of marketing also, right there, Katelyn. Education, right? If you can get this in the hands of the colleges, the technical colleges out there, even you can get started with their, the first thing they think about as a tool is your particular company. So there's a lot of competition inside of that also, but
right.
In additive, it might be material development or the way you're looking at plastics or metals and how you're trying to manufacture them. So there's a lot of different ways, I guess, to get your product in front of people early so that they make that. But also at the trade shows, it's you bringing in everyone from the educators to students to the CEOs to the application engineers. They're all in one place. So a lot of times that's where the meetings are held to, look at what's next on the horizon for their particular company.
Exciting to be in an industry that's mushrooming like this and to be in the middle of it while it's doing that change. And of course, Mikhail is my guide into that.
Yes.
Speaking of which, I think that Amanda has,
Yes.
is it Amanda's up next? Yeah.
Yes, I'm top four. All right, so I have a nice little change a little bit because we touched on this a little earlier about podcasting. So I'll start with Adam. I know you mentioned earlier about all the current trends and exciting things that are happening right now in podcasting. And so this method of reaching audiences has really gained popularity in recent years, right? And you gave your own story about how you got into podcasting and how fulfilling it has been for you. So there has to be some sort of pull into it. And I think it's really about sharing information. And there's an article on Forbes. It's called The Future of Podcast. And in that article, they cited that podcasting has grown tremendously since the days of the pandemic. So the future of podcasting looks bright right now, especially in attracting high quality listeners. You're attracting advertisers, and then you're attracting high quality content creators. So presently, it looks like it's on track to be, continuing for a long time. But I want you to really think now about the future of podcasting. So we know all well and good, it looks great right now, but what's going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years of all? Do you think that it's going to be a more permanent transition to personalized content? Or do you think like we're creating these niche audiences with knowledge silos that's really going to prevent people from really connecting? So I want to just hear your views on where do you think podcasting is heading in the future?
You want me to answer that one
Adam.
first? Okay.
Yeah, Adam, it's for you, Adam.
Wow. Yeah. I wish I knew perfectly where it was going. I think that we talked a little bit more about why it's grown so much since the pandemic, since 2020. It's been basically long form conversations that people can get into in focused areas. And like you're saying, education, siloed education, of course, different focused fields of podcasts are growing right now. The different people I listen to are actually from different fields of study, that I'm interested in. So that I think, just like education and everything else, it's good to grow, where your focus is. And especially if you're trying to learn more or hear from those type of people that have done things that you'd like to do. There's a lot inside of that information and knowing who's out there as this grows and who you could talk to. I think maybe in the future, even I guess to jump around thinking about future stuff, it's I think forming right now. We talked a little bit about ChatGPT and what that means. I think there might be a little bit more of maybe a response from that side of it inside of the conversation, maybe like what is Eddie, Mr. ChatGPT computer say over here, or whatever it is.
So you're thinking that they're going to include the content created from AI into conversations? Is that what you're
why
heading?
not? I don't see why not. I know now people even form a lot of their thoughts and their preparation inside of those environments. So it's already being done in a lot of sense. I don't see why it wouldn't be incorporated into even an ongoing guest. Think about like even some of the talk shows that have your Ed McMahon or whatever, your sidekick sitting next to you, that could be something that's done in that sense. There's a lot of ways, I don't know where that's going to be incorporated. It already is bleeding into it. But that's just one thing. I think in general, though, the education side is huge. And it's more that people want to reach and learn, the more it's available. It's almost, depending upon the student and, how aggressive you're going after something, you could really get a lot of great information. And I think even the children coming up now are already influenced by that, and by the time they're grown up, their way of doing things might be not such the same as far as you could probably learn what you need to do by just looking at the video or listening to the that those kind of things are already there. So yeah, how that affects us as a society is kind of, it's yet to be seen, but it's in motion as we speak. So that will definitely affect the future.
When you look at it, as you know, and I've mentioned, the number of listeners and that's listening to podcasts have grown surprisingly. And I read somewhere that it's going to surpass 160 million in 2023.
Yeah.
And that's in the, I just want to know what is your views on podcasting internationally, worldwide? Are you going to seek audiences outside of the US? Do you think that's going to become a trend in the future?
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. I'd say it's like 60-40 of my listening audience. I actually have a lot of European, Germany audience that listen in, even Australia, because I had a co-host that was out in Australia. So there's a lot of different things that's the thing too. I when I first started looking at where I was reaching to inside of the podcast, I was surprised, where I'd see even the cities that we're listening to, somewhere like Pisa, Italy, or, things you wouldn't think people are listening to your podcast in these locations, was all of a sudden happening. So that's an effect that you couldn't do by just, talking in your local radio station or things like that. So that's one of the effects that is actually part of the growth.
Great. And Katelyn, I just want to hear your thoughts on this assessment, but I want to look at it from an angle of lead generation and sales, which I think Adam touched on a little bit. So podcasting can, drive audiences to take some sort of action. And I want to know, what are your thoughts, or if you want to talk a little bit more about what you see the future of podcasting in, like building brands and overall marketing strategies?
Ooh. Well, Adam gave me a lot to work with too when he was talking about podcasting, but I think it's a little different approach when you're thinking about it from a branding perspective. When you think about podcasting and you're talking about like the Forbes article, I am so curious to see how this will develop in a way that you can, I think, with podcasting and it being individual users, whether it's with Adam, people in the additive industry, or it's a different type of connection from Austin, or it's another type of connection. I think what will end up happening is same as when I read different journalists that freelance and work for a different news organization and things along those lines. I think that the podcasting, based on the level of conversations that they're having, the experts involved with it, and the way that they're able to connect with not only a general audience, but a specific industry, I think that's where you'll really see almost a hierarchy of podcast growth that comes from that. The fact that people can follow when you put a new episode on your podcast, I listen to it right away, and and it gets my brain turning. I love that, like with my coffee. But if I listen to something else, it could be like not as engaging, not as informative, not as of what you're looking to get from it. So I think that you'll start to see almost anyone could start a podcast. I believe in the future that they'll become a real awareness of the professionalism of all the work that people put into podcasting, and start to partner with more historic media brands to behind it at that point, of people that have that true talent. And when you're talking about brand building, most organizations, if they're looking at engaging with more media approaches of becoming with PR of more recognition, more familiarity, all of those, they would be looking to those more normalized media sources, depending on the demographic that they look at. Someone who owns their own business for 40 years is going to be taking in media a different way in comparison to the way that media is looked at for the new engineer within their design division. So I think when building a brand, you really have to really narrow it down of who are you trying to reach, and the overall branding process with that.
So you brought up an interesting point with building brands, and I just got this crazy idea. Do you think that maybe in the future that these companies that are already giants in branding, like Facebook or even Starbucks, do you think that maybe they will be creating their own podcast? Like, so instead of having, So do they have? So do they have like their own? But do they focus only on their branding itself, or are they bringing in external guests So if you have like
actually.
Okay.
Oh, because great question though. But people are starting to get into it. That's where I actually noticed it on LinkedIn the other day. I saw great content coming from, I will send you her name. She is with Deloitte. She previously worked at LinkedIn, and she highlights of all these different events of within her industry with tech and with Deloitte, and then also is a top voice on LinkedIn. So it's one of those, if people are coming, I mean, Deloitte could have the podcast, but LinkedIn could have the podcast. But then you also get this recognition as a top producer that could be on a Forbes podcast at this point, where they're taking different people to diversify all these different topics, but focusing on those experts. What do you think, Adam?
Oh, I agree. And you see everyone from, the CEOs of the companies having their own podcast to, the engineers having their own podcast to sales market. There's all different sides of it, depending, upon the audience and what they need. So, it's there, it's happening.
Yeah, I just think that, because it's growing and it's morphing into this whole thing. So you have the individual side, and then you have the brand side, and the company side. I'm just a little bit skeptical of whether it's going to all just end up as big mush in the future, as opposed to, having something that people can gain the necessary knowledge as quickly as they want. It's like going to the grocery store, right? And you have like 10 million choices of cereals. So I'm a little bit worried about the amount of content that's being generated and how that's going to affect us in the future.
Sure.
What are your thoughts?
That's the feedback side of it, right? I mean, but you're getting down to the reality of it. You're looking at in additive, it's might be customization, personalization, marketing strategies on the ability of additive to enable mass customization or personalization, those kind of things. You're looking at tailored solutions for like your customers, but we're talking about like an enhanced digital presence, all in all. Companies investing in strengthening their online presence, optimized websites, social media engagement, interactive platforms. And that's where that would fall, effectively communicating what's going on with their capabilities, their expertise, and their success stories. That's all still the same frame. It's just that this is now part of it. That's podcasting is now part of that in that special way.
And then
excellent proposition. Thank you.
And then we get the use of AI as a defensive move, as a consumer, like, because I'm going into thinking about what Amanda said.
Yeah.
What happens when it all turns to mush because there's so much? So then that's when, and this is not, of course, my original idea. I remember it only because Mikhail clued me in that you actually have these tools now that can go out and find your content for you that you want.
Yes, but okay, John. So I have to jump in here. So I think what's really interesting, and my colleague Paul, who can speak 4 different languages. I mean, English, German, Spanish, Portuguese, and he's well versed in ChatGPT. There, I feel like, and what I hear also too from like a copywriting perspective in the writing community and things along those lines, I think that there will always be a spot where it won't always be able to be put into ChatGPT, or it won't be able to be AI completely done. I think that's just the way of our culture and the individual viewpoint of how we would look at something and how that message is communicated. I mean, if it gets to that point, then everything is written by robots.
Then the robots will be selling to the robots.
Well, thankfully, thankfully we could
back
back up to the old adage, it's another tool in the toolbox. That's for sure.
Yeah. I sort of jumped in on an Amanda question, and I apologize for sort of stomping on.
No, not at all, John.
Good stuff.
I'm done.
Mikhail,
I'd like to take this series of questions a little bit further and broaden the horizon. So we talked about podcasts. Now I'm thinking about communication in general, and thinking, 50, 100, 200 years ahead. What important trends do you see in society today and in the future that will change us as humans, and specifically in the way we communicate? So we know that for example, social media is making some tectonic shifts in how we consume and generate information. Adam, you mentioned this TikTok short videos that are on the rise right now, right?
Sure.
So what else do you see? How do you think it will evolve? What are the trends? Can you imagine that in the future, will we even need to communicate with each other, or will maybe we all be connected into this internet of minds with shared consciousness where no communication is needed anymore? So what are your thoughts? Just try to be very creative.
Wow. It gets kind of scary, doesn't it? I like to believe a lot of the AI people that I speak with about, controlling or at least shaping some sort of a love buffer in all of this, looking into the future, though, I think, we're starting to see it, we're more linked directly to what we need in personalization. And, that's been thrown around a lot, that word. But the reality is, with those developments, the challenges that people have had looking at personalization as a reality, because I've heard it put in different ways, like somebody who's maybe smaller and is looking for, different size shirts, they're not going to pay for, a special shirt to be made every time they need a new shirt. They're just going to buy it off the rack, even, so there's this argument on personalization, like, will it really take off? But I think with everything happening in technology, it definitely is and will. And as we go into the future with communication, as we're seeing, by being able to log in, having your own profile on different websites or things like that, when, they just know how to market to us and to, get to what we need in general right now, that just will keep on. I think it's all going to be part of your almost like holodeck. You know what I'm saying? It's what's around you and what you want to be around you. You could create around you, which is going to be, it is wild already, but I feel like it's going to be more of your room, what's around you, in where you're sitting, are going to be those things that are very integrated and augmented to your personal likings. And that's just a reflection of time, right? That's how it's always been. We never had a monitor in front of us. Now we have monitors in front of us. So, there's all these things that progress forward. And I think it's, that microchips in the brains are already happening and all that other stuff. But the reality of the personalization of it and actually being to address each of the individual needs out there, which does then bring in the creativity of it, because we are all different and all the same in different ways. So having those unique things that we could focus on individually will still be able to grow in the future. That's my hope. But I think that individualism hopefully won't be lost. It will be, enhanced. That's I guess the bigger picture I'd like to imagine in the future.
No, thank you, Adam. Katelyn, do you have anything to add?
Yes, that is the internet of the minds. I mean, you're kind of making my head spin a little bit, Mikhail. I mean, I love that. But when you're thinking about the ways that you're communicating, I think Adam brings up a really great point of digitally, we almost already have another sense of ourselves that's online already. When which is great. And then it's also, sometimes you get a little hesitant when you think about it in that regard of, I have a Google search history, mostly of additive things. Then it also has, personal things. Then it has, the way that the data tracks and information is seen on social media, but also on email coming in, and where the data points are of where I've traveled, and what I also reinforce as a user too, of yes, I'd like to see more of that, and encouraging that type of traffic flow and clicks. It actually is exciting that it makes it easier to find the information that you're looking for the more you repeat it and you encourage it, and authentically you are as you're working and communicating with people. But when you start to think of, for example, a thought process of the mind. So, normally I'm thinking about this in a work sense of, I would communicate with my colleagues on, email or phone or Teams or a chat or something along those lines. But if we had couple decades down the road and I didn't have to type in anything and there was just some sort of consciousness of thinking, I think there'd have to be some way of filtering and compartmentalizing, because it's just an interesting thought process of, would you be hearing everything? Could you shut it off? Could things get interrupted? Could a random thought come into play? What does that sound like? So I think it will continue to become more and more advanced based on what we see, I feel like, from an AI perspective and from a digital tech perspective. I'm just curious to see I think they're going to be the driving force of how we communicate, because ultimately the younger generations feel more comfortable. It just makes their life easier, as well as it just connects everybody. So the more that we continue to rely on that, I think that'll really determine it.
Wow. Can you imagine the brain police and
You're going.
I was thinking about getting flagged for certain thoughts.
Oh my God!
No.
Yeah,
Right.
If I'm doing think to type, and I think these things that are subversive, where can I store that? Can I stick my finger in my ear and click a switch that stops the think to type, so that I'm not leaving an evidence trail for the brain police to follow?
Right. I mean, and if you think about it even further from like an education standpoint, like if you could really think about that, like, is that how people would take tests? They would log in and just think. I mean, it's just really fast. It's a fascinating concept.
It's John Connor meme with him shaking his head, right? From the Terminator.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
No, you definitely don't want to hear the train of thought unfiltered from every inhabitant of the planet or at the same time.
Talk about so much data, right?
Right.
Right. That would become mush. That goes back to the mush situation
Yes.
Amanda was talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Chaotic.
And I want to just share a story, because I don't know if this technology is actually present in the US. And I went Spain actually recently and did a little shopping. And at self-checkout, you just walk with your stuff and you scan, your tag on the computer. Yeah. They had a self-checkout counter where you just put all of your items. So this is like clothes. So you can have like 10, 15. And you just put them on the counter and it scanned everything for you. And when I put it on, there was no particular order. I was just like dumping it onto the counter, getting ready to get the tags to scan. So as I dumped it on and I looked over to the screen, it had already checked out everything that was on that counter. And I was like, I don't think this technology is in the US. So, and then I looked overhead and there was this scanner above me that was kind of like a camera looking down. And I was really thinking about, well, how was it reading, all the tags, the weight, because everything was just in a bundle. So it's our way now it brings it back to communicating, right? I did not give any input to that computer, but yet it was giving me an output. So when you think about that sort of technology in the future, it's really hard to wrap your mind around it when you're just thinking something and there it is. So I just wanted to share that crazy. Yeah. I don't think it's here in the US. I don't know if you guys have come across that type of checkout before, but
I've seen it in production, but not in the grocery store.
Yeah, and this was actually in a mall, like a shopping mall store. So yeah, it's like blown away, totally blown away.
I have heard of things. I have a very tech-savvy friend, Martina, and she started grocery shopping with an app where she would actually go through the grocery store and already scan the items, so that there was no checkout. And then what was interesting, it not necessarily that process, but was that she would receive, because it was through an app, she would receive the data or the email reminders or a text reminder of you might be getting low on something, and it would almost look at like what her shopping habits were from an inventory standpoint. For her, super helpful. She has kids around and trying to keep grocery shopping stacked and all of that during the summer.
Right.
That's where it starts to get into, well, that's helpful, but do I want all of that?
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? Because your refrigerator will track it, or that is not mine, but anybody who buys a new refrigerator has an option for that sort of intelligence in the appliance. the intelligence gets distributed all over the place. It's that Internet of Things, Internet of Everything. The next thing that we do is to get our guests to really get open-minded.
Wow.
And even more so, right? So it's about taking an imaginary trip. So first of all, you have, and each of you gets a chance at this. Do you think that actual time travel is possible? And even if it is or isn't, would it be only forward or only backward, or would it be possible both ways? What are some of the paradoxes that you might imagine in traveling to the past? But the most fun part of this question series is, if you had the chance to take one time trip, forward or backward, where in time would you go and why would you go there? So let's start with Adam.
Wow. Oh, I was thinking so deep about that too. Yeah. So the first part of that is what? I know I was thinking about where I might go, but the first part is what?
So do you think time travel is possible? And what direction would it be possible?
Oh, wow. Because of all the sci-fi insanity I've been through, I tend to believe that there's so many instances out there, so that has to be possible somewhere.
Right.
However, I can only use my small mind here on Earth to think about what that might look like, and what I might do with it. If I had a choice, one choice, like you're saying, to be at one point in history, future or past, something like that. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. We're blessed and cursed by our own experiences, right? And our own histories. And so we look at things from our own view, and so of course things are important to me and a lifeline that I've heard of, instead of stuff that I might not be able to get to. So I find from my my parents' timeline, I probably like to check out the 60s. They seem like a very interesting time, in so many ways. And I think of it, a lot of it has to do with the explosion of technology at that time and how things were changing, back then. So I guess that would be my quick answer for that is yes, I do believe that it is possible. Where, I'm not sure. If any time period, probably check out the 60s.
Well, there's that old saying that if you remember the 60s, you didn't really experience them properly.
Well, there you go,
But now you would be going back and experiencing it. Yeah. And I can say I'm 64, so I did have some of that experience.
Oh, nice times. Yes.
Let me tell you. Yeah, it's well, here's an example. It was during that time that the cassette tape was revolutionary. So imagine that back there. And then you've got eventually the Sony Walkman, which is such a precursor to things that we take completely for granted now. So I think you're onto something with that, going back to the 60s.
Yeah, very, kind of a turning point for many things at that time.
What do you think, Katelyn? Is time travel possible? And where would you go?
So I think it will not be possible, but if it was, I think it would be only forward. And just by the way that I feel like we look at forward thinking just in our culture of trying to anticipate, visions of what's next and anticipating certain things. I would imagine we would be able at one point to visualize or see or anticipate with more detail. But I think the actual travel portion, I feel like that would be restricted, highly restricted, and definitely not backwards, if that makes sense, because that would open up a whole, so many cans of worms.
The time travel paradox.
Forward too.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I had to go back. Well, I think honestly, it's interesting because it has been in the news so recently with the submarine going back to the Titanic. I still remember this very vividly. My first eye-opening social confusion, to social constructs and things revolved right in the fourth grade. I remember sitting there hearing about the Titanic and hearing about this messaging and this branding of this unsinkable ship, all these different social classes, different cultures, all trying to go on the ship of what would be coming next from the departure, how it was seen. And I think there still are so many questions of how were things communicated, what was like all these different items. I think that's why people are so fascinated still to this day with it, of how could we learn from that. So I would love to go back around that time in Europe. I'd love to be there but not go on the ship. I'd jump off in Ireland.
Yeah.
But I don't need to go like the
I was about to say, Katelyn, I was like, you don't want to be on that ship.
Yes, I mean, well, and I think no, but it's interesting because even there's been talk of recreating the Titanic, but people would want to see what was actually there. There's so many things there. So I think just as a sociologist and as a marketing perspective, I'd like to see what was the messaging and the thought process and what was actually happening of communicating there.
So you're more interested in the communication part at that time, not so much on the engineering part of the ship, right?
I'd almost be the communication, even our surrounding, like the engineering. So the captain said this. So was that okay, or was it because the first class passenger who paid for this portion, had that? I mean, I think that's where I'm more so looking at it from.
Got it.
Sorry,
yes, no submarine trips for me.
I'm sorry. Say again. You said no something. What?
Oh, no submarine rides. I think
no. Yeah,
I think everybody's on that same thing. But I do find it interesting of like being so interested in that concept of we're just so unfamiliar with, we can watch documentaries, we can, hear firsthand stories, we can hear different perspectives, we can travel, but, really understanding it, I think there's a lot of confusion on certain topics that fascinate people.
Yeah, there's a thread here too that goes to the submarine that just imploded, to our experiences. I think, Katelyn, you're going into that reminds me of the fact that, of course, a lot of us seeing this submarine disappear and having the whole world look at it, a lot of us, I think, were thinking, you can see so much online, so much high quality video about the Titanic, of the Titanic at depth. Why would you want to do this and endanger your life? And the answer is people still need to experience things firsthand. Now, that's putting aside the question of whether they were being wise about doing this activity. The fact that they're doing it is that people still want to have the experiences themselves and in person. So all the digitization we're talking about, virtual reality, metaverse, if you will, this is happening. We are experiencing, the AI is coming into our lives whether we want it or not. But as with the printing press, as with the computer, we do adjust as a society and we incorporate things in unpredictable ways, which is why it's fun to try to predict, but it makes that prediction that much harder. So I really appreciate the conversation, the things that Katelyn and Adam have brought to this conversation, insights into where is podcasting going, how is the communications going to evolve, but a lot of it does come back to storytelling. It does come back to individuals' personal experiences. We ask each guest to come up with a couple of sentences to summarize what they might want to point out for our listeners, things that they would like our listeners to remember or think about. But before we do that, I'd like to ask Amanda and Mikhail if they have any further questions or comments.
No, I don't. But thank you both for being on this show. I've really enjoyed the conversation so far.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the conversation. Great thoughts. Really good. Thank you.
So, Katelyn, we'll start with you this time. What are a couple of things that, based on the whole conversation and based on your own experiences and what you're up to now, what are a couple of thoughts that you'd like to leave for the audience?
Well, I think we really dove into a lot of futuristic thoughts and concepts that really, derived around communication being interpreted, as well as being conscious about individually how you're perceiving it. So really thinking about, we have, with the explosion of ChatGPT and the way that I'm excited to see how that will develop over time. But really thinking of individually of, is that where you would like, creating a structure for a writing to really communicate what you're feeling during an important piece of your life. Do you want that written by ChatGPT, or will that really express the message? Or how is that really communicated? I think just keeping an open mind of consciousness of not being an individual in a very potentially automated and futuristic world approaching us.
Cool. Another thing before we leave you and go to Adam is, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
If they would like to reach out to me on Katelyn Lennon at LinkedIn.com, as well as you can always find Wurth Additive Group, where Mikhail and I are working on some very exciting projects, as well as a charismatic team around us. You can always connect with us there. So
awesome. Adam, your couple of sentences.
Yes. All right. No, thanks everybody. It's been a fun time. Thanks for having me here. John, Mikhail, and Amanda, and of course Katelyn. Had a good time chatting with you. I guess she nailed a lot of it. Is think about where your strengths are. I think the individual contribution and passion that we all have is an important thing. And I think that's where you could definitely hone into things that you want to do as you develop younger in your career and later in your career. Of adding, if you're looking at communications and content, adding things that are coming from you into this world. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are homogenized, obviously, but the individual and personalized contribution, like we're seeing in podcasts, we mentioned that earlier, and that's a big part of what is successful, drawing from your own experience and being able to share things that are important to you. So I think that's a good place to focus. A lot of people try to be like other people out there that are podcasting or putting out content, and it's good to learn from other people, but also keep it personalized. Be yourself. I guess that's the big message. And that's all we could do. But I think even me over my career, I've got pulled away by trying to be or sound or do things that other podcasts are doing. That I'm like, well, I could just relax and be me. It's a lot easier.
Oh yes, yes.
But
that's an interesting lesson, because in all of this, it is too easy to lose the human aspect. And what you both are outlining or underscoring, that is the human aspect does not go away.
No.
So how do people reach you, Adam?
Yeah, you could reach me again on LinkedIn, Adam J. Penna, and also at alldigitalam.com.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vision 2222. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Our YouTube channel is called Vision 2222 Podcast, all one word. We're also on Podbean at vision2222podcast.podbean.com. Again, Vision 2222 Podcast is all one word. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vision 2222. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Please also comment, and we'll do our best to respond.